The year was 1892. Wyoming was a hard land. The wind cut like a knife. Snows came early. They stayed late. Summers were short. Dust choked the air. Hope was a thin thread. It frayed easy in that country. Men grew tough, or they broke. There wasn't much in between. The land itself seemed to breed conflict. It was too big, too empty, too much to fight over. And fight they did. For grass, for water, for survival itself. The Powder River country was the heart of it. A vast expanse of rolling plains, broken by sudden sharp buttes. Winters were brutal. Blizzards howled for days. Cattle froze where they stood. Men huddled by meager fires. They dreamed of spring. When spring came, it was a green miracle. But it didn't last. The sun baked the earth hard. The rivers shrank. Grass turned brown. This was the stage for a bitter drama. A war was brewing, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Dark clouds, flashes of lightning, the scent of rain and blood. Tension hung heavy. You could feel it in the saloons, in the quiet of the range. Cattle barons held sway. They had come first, claimed the best land. Their herds numbered in the thousands. They saw the open range as their kingdom. Their word was law, or so they thought. Johnson County was a powder keg, and the fuse was lit. If you're enjoying this story, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating history. The cattle barons were kings, or they acted like it. They came from back east, some from overseas, England, Scotland. They had money, lots of it. They bought up land, or just used it. The government owned most of it. But the barons didn't care. They spread their herds far and wide, across miles of unfenced prairie. Their brands were burned onto thousands of hides. Hereford, Shorthorn, Longhorn, Walking Gold they called them. These men built empires of beef. They lived in big houses, grand ranches. Some were like forts. They had fine horses, good whiskey. They held fancy parties, while their cowboys worked the range. Hard men, those cowboys, loyal to the brand. They rode through blizzards, fought off wolves and rustlers, or so the barons claimed. The barons formed an association, the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, a powerful group. They made the rules. They had politicians in their pockets, judges too. They believed Wyoming belonged to them, and their cows. Their names were known, respected by some, feared by others. Men like W.C. Irvine, Hubert Teschemacher, Fred Hesse. They saw themselves as pioneers, builders of a new frontier. They had tamed a wild land, or so they told themselves. They brought order, civilization, but their order was for themselves. Their civilization was built on exclusion. The homesteaders came with dreams. Small dreams, mostly, a piece of land to call their own. 160 acres. That's what the government promised, if they could prove it up. Build a cabin, plow the soil, stay 5 years. It sounded simple. It wasn't. The land was harsh. The work was backbreaking. Winters were cruel. Summers were scorching. But they came anyway, in wagons, on horseback. Some even walked, carrying all they owned, which wasn't much. They were called nesters, a name spat out like a curse by the cattlemen. The barons saw them as squatters, thieves. They believed the homesteaders fenced the water holes. They thought they stole their cattle. Maybe some did. Desperate men do desperate things, but most just wanted a chance. A place to raise a family, to grow some crops, maybe run a few cows of their own. They weren't trying to build empires, just lives, simple lives, on a patch of unforgiving earth. Their cabins were small, sod, or rough-hewn logs, dirt floors, leaky roofs. They battled drought, hailstorms, grasshoppers, loneliness. The vastness of the prairie could swallow a soul, but they were tough, resilient. They had to be. Women worked alongside men, children too. The Wyoming Stock Growers Association, the WSGA. It sounded official, respectable, and it was, to some. To the big cattlemen, it was their voice, their shield, their sword. Formed in the 1870s, it grew powerful, fast. Its members were the wealthiest ranchers, the men who ran Wyoming, or thought they did. Their goal was simple: protect their interests, their cattle, their land, their way of life, at any cost. They had friends in high places: Cheyenne, Washington, D.C. The WSGA controlled the cattle industry. They dictated who could own cattle, who could sell them. They kept brand books, hired stock detectives. They lobbied for laws that favored them. They ran the roundup, the big spring event, where all the cattle were gathered, sorted, branded. It was their system, their rules, and they enforced them. With an iron fist, if you crossed the WSGA, you were in trouble. Big trouble. Your cattle might disappear. Your credit might dry up. You might even find yourself on a blacklist. The association claimed it fought rustling, cattle theft, and there was rustling. No doubt about it, the open range made it easy. A man could change a brand, drive a few head off. But the WSGA had a broad definition of rustler. Anyone they didn't like, anyone who challenged their power, small ranchers, homesteaders, especially those who dared to own cattle. Whispers started like dry leaves skittering in the wind. Then they grew louder. Rustlers. The word was a brand itself, burned onto reputations, often without proof. The big cattlemen claimed they were losing thousands of head to thieves, small operators, homesteaders. They said these nesters were building their herds with stolen mavericks, unbranded calves, or by altering existing brands. The accusations flew thick and fast, like snowflakes in a blizzard, sticking to anyone the barons disliked. Fear spread through Johnson County. Homesteaders looked over their shoulders. They knew the WSGA had power. They had heard stories of men disappearing, of warnings delivered late at night. Some were innocent, just trying to make a living, running a few cows to supplement their crops. They found unbranded calves on their land. The custom of the range said they could claim them, but the barons changed the rules. Now any maverick belonged to the association, or so they decreed. The Wyoming Stock Growers Association decided drastic measures were needed. The law was too slow, too uncertain. They would take the law into their own hands. Frank Canton was a key man, a former sheriff, a stock detective for the WSGA. He was known as a man who got things done, no matter the cost. He helped organize the plan, a secret plan, to invade Johnson County, to eliminate the men on their list, to terrorize the homesteaders into submission or into leaving. They hired gunmen, 23 of them, from Texas, hired killers, regulators they called themselves. Nate Champion was a small rancher, a cowboy, known for his skill with a rope and a gun. He was accused of rustling by the WSGA. He denied it vehemently. He was well liked by many, respected for his courage, his independence. He knew he was on the barons' list. He knew they were coming for him. But he didn't run. He wasn't the running kind. He was at the KC Ranch, on the Powder River, with a friend, Nick Ray, and 2 trappers who were just passing through. They were unsuspecting, unprepared for what was coming. The invaders surrounded the small cabin before dawn on April 9th, 1892, a cold, gray morning. They captured the 2 trappers who had stepped out for water. Then the shooting started. Nick Ray was hit early, mortally wounded. Nate Champion was alone, trapped inside the cabin. But he didn't surrender. He fought back with courage, with defiance. He held off 50 armed men for hours. He wrote in a small notebook documenting the siege. His words were calm, clear, despite the bullets tearing through the thin log walls. "Boys, I feel pretty lonesome just now," he wrote. "I wish there was someone here with me so we could watch all sides at once." He described the attackers, their positions. After killing Nate Champion and Nick Ray, the invaders felt bold, victorious. They rode on towards Buffalo. Their list was still long. But news of their actions spread fast like wildfire across the prairie. A rider from the KC Ranch, he had seen the smoke, found the bodies. He galloped to Buffalo, sounded the alarm. The townspeople were outraged, horrified. They were not about to let a private army of hired killers take over their county. They armed themselves, ready to fight. Sheriff William Red Angus, he was the law in Johnson County. He was a tough man, honest. He wasn't in the pocket of the barons. He quickly organized a posse. Hundreds of men joined. Farmers, ranchers, townsfolk. They were angry, determined. They rode out to meet the invaders. Just when it seemed the invaders were doomed, help arrived. Not for the people of Johnson County, but for the cattle barons and their gunmen. The acting governor of Wyoming, Amos Barber, he was a friend of the barons. He had telegraphed President Benjamin Harrison, claiming a state of insurrection, begging for federal troops. The president ordered the U.S. cavalry from nearby Fort McKinney to intervene, to stop the fighting, to restore order. The cavalry rode in on the 3rd day of the siege, just as Sheriff Angus's posse was about to make its final assault. The soldiers took the invaders into custody, rescued them, some said, from the wrath of the citizens. The barons and their hired guns were taken to Cheyenne for trial. But the trial was a farce, a mockery of justice. They had the best lawyers money could buy. Witnesses were intimidated or disappeared. The trial was moved to Laramie, then delayed again and again. Eventually all charges were dropped, due to lack of evidence or lack of funds for prosecution. The invaders walked free. Not a single one was convicted for the murders, for the invasion, for the terror they had brought to Johnson County. The cattle barons returned to their ranches. The Texas gunmen went home. Justice was denied. The people of Johnson County felt betrayed by their government, by the legal system. The powerful had protected their own, as they always did. The Johnson County War was over, but its echoes lingered for a long, long time. It marked the end of the open range era in many ways. The dust settled, but the memory remained, sharp and bitter, like the Wyoming wind.